They say no one rides out to the edge of the bitter hills in December, unless they've run out of time or choices. That morning, the snow fell in slow, heavy curtains over the high prairie, quieting even the wind. And in that silence, Jedediah Carter heard a sound no man expected to find out there: a baby, crying on his porch. Jed was not a man who startled easy. Life had long since stripped away what softness he had. At 43, he lived alone in a small log cabin with a stubborn mule named Clara, and a kettle that never quite stopped simmering. Folks in town called him the Trapper, though he hadn't laid steel in years. Truth was, Jed had spent most of the last decade trying to forget the world. But that morning, when he opened his cabin door and saw that bundle lying in a woven basket half buried in snow, he didn't blink. He just stood there, steam from his coffee curling past his whiskered jaw, and stared at the child like it had come from a place he used to know. The baby was red-faced and squalling, wrapped in a quilt that looked handmade and hurried. There was no note, no footprints but his own, and the ones already filling with snow. Jed bent slowly, like the air had thickened, and lifted the child from the frozen porch boards. It was a girl, tiny, maybe 3 weeks old. "Well," he muttered, voice rough as old rope, "what in hell am I supposed to do with you?" He'd asked the wind, the trees, maybe God. He got no answer, just the hush of snow brushing against the roof and the low creak of Clara shifting in the barn. Still, he brought the child inside. What no one in town knew, not the preacher, not the old woman who ran the feed store, not even his brother back in Missouri, was that Jedediah Carter had once held a daughter just like this. Long ago, when the world was warmer and he still smiled. She'd died before her first birthday, and his wife, well, she'd gone not long after. Some folks drown in drink. Jed drowned in silence. But something in this baby's cry cut through all that. It was neat, pure, and helpless. And something else familiar. He tried the preacher first. Rode through the storm to town, baby swaddled in his coat. But the preacher's wife had been ill, and they turned him away, gentle but firm. The orphanage was full. No one wanted a newborn in the dead of winter. So Jed rode back, quieter this time, not angry, just resigned. He named her Lily, not after anything in particular. It just seemed to fit. She had dark hair, a strong set to her mouth, and she calmed when he hummed, which surprised them both. In those first weeks, he read old journals by firelight, scrawled lists of supplies, learned to mix goat's milk and honey just right. And somewhere in the middle of that bleak winter, Jed Carter started talking again, not to people, but to Lily. Long, slow conversations about trees, snow patterns, horses that outsmarted men, and sometimes about love. No one ever came for her. No one claimed her. And spring arrived slow and wet, thawing more than just the land. Now here's where some stories might turn grand outlaws. Shootouts, revelations carved in stone. But not this one. This one grew quiet, steady as dusk. Jed raised Lily himself, taught her how to read, ride, cook, hunt elk without scaring the herd. She called him Papa before she was 2. She never asked where she came from, not until the day she left. 17 and proud, heading east with a scholarship and her mother's fire in her eyes. Jed waved from the porch, the same one he'd found her on, and stood there long after the dust settled. That was 20 winters ago, and on the eve of the first snow this year. Just as Jed was lighting his lamp and settling into the chair by the hearth, a knock came at the door. Soft, hesitant. Like memory itself had grown fingers and rapped once, then waited. He opened the door and time folded in on itself. A woman stood there in a long gray coat, her face rimmed in frost. She looked younger than him, but older than he remembered, and in her arms, wrapped in a familiar kind of quilt, was a baby boy with Yet's eyes. She didn't say much at first, just stood there, shivering, until Jed whispered her name. "Lily." She nodded, tears already breaking loose. "I didn't know where else to go." Jed looked at the boy, at her, then back into the cabin, where the fire still burned, steady and warm. And for a long time, neither of them moved. What would you do if someone knocked on your door after 20 years with a baby in their arms and eyes that looked like yours? Leave a comment below, and let your heart speak. This is just the beginning. The door creaked shut behind her, soft as breath. Snow clung to her coat like tiny ghosts, melting slow beneath the warmth of Yet's cabin. He didn't rush her, just stood still by the hearth, letting the crackle of fire and the weight of years fill the silence between them. Lily's eyes, though rimmed in weariness, held something deep, remorse, maybe, or fear. Jed couldn't tell yet. All he knew was this: His little girl, grown into a woman, had come back, and she wasn't alone. She eased onto the edge of the old rocker, the one that had soothed her through fevers and growing pains, and cradled the baby close. The child, 6 months old, maybe had his grandfather's eyes. That quiet, steady blue that had watched too many winters pass. The boy didn't cry, just blinked at Jed like he already knew him. Jed's voice came low. "What's his name?" Lily glanced down, brushing a bit of snow from the baby's cheek. "Daniel." I almost called him Jed, but it didn't feel right. Not after. She trailed off. Jed stirred the fire with an iron poker. Sparks lifted into the chimney, dancing like memories trying to take shape. "After what?" She hesitated. "After the way I left." Jed didn't flinch. "You didn't leave angry. You left ready. And that's different." Lily looked up, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. "You always let me go. You didn't belong to me," Jed said simply. "You were mine to protect, not to keep." She blinked, and for a second, her mouth trembled like the little girl inside her was fighting to the surface. "I never told you goodbye, or thank you. You didn't need to." He reached for a kettle, poured 2 mugs of coffee, one for him, one for her. She took it with both hands, grateful. The wind howled outside, like it was circling them in time, safe, but watching. "I thought I'd never come back here," she murmured. "I made a life out east. Got married, had Daniel, I taught school, lived in a town with sidewalks and gas lamps." Her voice faltered. "But then Marcus' father, he passed last spring. Sudden fever, and everything just broke." Jed didn't speak. He let her pour it out, like the way the old stove let heat seep slow into the bones of the room. "I tried to hold it together, for Daniel, for the kids at school, but I was drowning. And one night, I remembered the way this cabin smelled in winter. The sound of your boots on the floor. The way you used to tell me everything would be all right, even when the world was burning. I got on a train. I needed to come home." Jed looked at the boy again. "You're not the only one." She smiled, tired but real. "I wasn't sure you'd want us." "Girl," he said, setting his cup down with a soft thud, "I never stopped wanting you. Even when you were 1,000 miles away, and too proud to write." Her face crumpled at that, quiet tears, not sobbing. Just the kind that slip through when the weight lets go for a moment. "I left you," she whispered. Double quotes. "No. Someone left you on my porch. I got to choose you. You didn't owe me anything." She laughed through the tears. "You always did talk like a storybook cowboy." Jed grinned. "Still got the hat to match." She looked around, then really looked and noticed nothing had changed. Same stove, same table, same chair with a notch in the leg, from where she once tripped with a bowl of stew. "You kept everything." He nodded. "Even the toy horse you carved out of birch." She spotted it on the mantel, dusty but proud. A little carving with uneven legs and no tail. "I forgot all about that." "I didn't." They fell into quiet again. But it was a good quiet, the kind that settles after a storm. Daniel cooed softly in her lap. Jed reached over, rough hand brushing the baby's tiny fingers. "He's got strong hands. He pulls hair." "Well," Jed chuckled, "he'll fit in just fine." Then, night crept in outside the windows. But inside the cabin, warmth grew. The fire danced. The shadows softened. And for the first time in years, Jed felt the cabin breathe different, less like a shelter, more like a home. "You got somewhere to sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Didn't plan that far." "Well then, I'll take the cot. You and the boy get the bed. It's warmer in back." She looked up, uncertain. "You sure?" Jed just nodded. "Ain't nothing in this house more important than a mother and her son." And with that, Lily stood and crossed the room, Daniel in her arms. At the doorway to the back room, she turned. "Thank you, Papa." He didn't answer with words, just lifted his chin, eyes soft with something that didn't need saying. Outside, the snow kept falling. The next morning broke slow and silver, the way winter dawns often do, muted, uncertain. Like the sun had to think twice before rising over the snowy hills. Jed stirred before the light had fully touched the windows, slipping out of his cot with a creak of old joints and muscle memory sharpened by years of solitude. He didn't need much, never had. A tin basin, a kettle on the stove, the whisper of steam rising as he fed the fire. But this morning felt different, fuller, as if the cabin itself had held its breath all these years, and was finally letting it out. He stood at the window for a while, looking out at the tracks half buried by the snow. Her tracks, her return had stirred something inside him he didn't quite recognize. Yet not regret, not grief. Maybe it was grace. Or the chance to rewrite something time had left unfinished. Behind him, a soft rustle came from the back room. Then footsteps. He didn't turn right away, just listened. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair unpinned, bundled in a worn shawl she must have pulled from the trunk at the foot of the bed. Her eyes looked better this morning, clearer, like sleep had shaken off some of the fear that clung to her. "Morning," she said, quiet. Jed poured her coffee, handed it to her like it was the most natural thing in the world. "He sleep all right?" She nodded. "Better than me." He gave a knowing smile. "Takes time." There was a long pause as she sipped. Then, "Do you ever think about her?" He didn't ask who she meant. "Every day." Lily looked down. He used to imagine her face when I was a girl. Thought maybe I had her eyes, or her laugh, but I never knew for sure. Jed sat down slowly. "You had her spirit. That wildness. She couldn't stay in one place long, but when she loved, it was real. And when she gave you to me." His voice broke a little, just enough to hear it. "I think it was the only thing she ever did out of pure hope." "Do you think she's still alive?" Jed stared at the flames. "I used to. Then I stopped needing to know. Figured she gave me what she could, and that had to be enough." Lily nodded, quiet. "I hated her for a long time, for leaving me, for not coming back." "That's all right," Jed said. "Some anger's born of hurt. It doesn't make it wrong." A soft sound came from the other room, Daniel waking. Lily excused herself, disappearing behind the curtain with a rustle of blankets and low murmurs only a mother could speak. Jed remained by the fire, fingers wrapped around his mug, eyes glassy with the weight of time. When she returned, Daniel was blinking up at the light, bundled in a thick shawl. "Mind if we go outside for a bit? I want him to see the snow." First time, Jed rose without a word, pulled on his coat, and led them out the front door. The world was hushed beneath a thick white blanket. Every tree bowed under the weight, every fence post frosted like an old photograph. The sky above was pale and open, as if waiting. Lily held Daniel close as he reached a tiny hand toward the cold. "He's not sure what to make of it." "Good," Jed said softly. "First lesson. Life's cold sometimes, but it sure is honest." She smiled at that. "Is that what you taught me?" "I tried," he said, glancing sideways. "But you taught me more than I ever gave you." They stood for a long moment in that cold light, just watching Daniel blink at the bright world. Lily rocked him gently, lost in the moment. Then her voice softened, uncertain. "I don't know if I'm meant to stay." Jed didn't answer right away, just kept looking out at the snow, the hills beyond, the horizon that stretched all the way to memory. "Well," he said finally, "that's the thing about this place. It doesn't ask you to stay, but it remembers you if you do." She looked at him, the man who'd raised her with quiet hands and a broken heart, who never asked for thanks, who never spoke more than he needed to, but always said what mattered. "I don't want to run anymore, Papa. I don't know who I am without all that moving." Jed took Daniel from her arms slowly, carefully, and the boy cooed, as if he'd been passed to safety. "You're a mother, a teacher, a daughter who came back. That's more than most folks figure out in a lifetime." She smiled then, eyes glassy, with something bigger than relief. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe finally seeing herself through his eyes. Inside the cabin, the fire waited. So did the next chapter, still unwritten, but warm in its promise. That evening, the sky turned the color of ashes and rose petals, the kind of winter dusk that made the land feel endless. Jed stood outside, splitting wood, his breath fogging as he worked, the rhythmic thunk of the axe echoing through the trees. Inside the cabin, Lily rocked Daniel near the fire, her eyes following the flicker of flames. Her thoughts pulled somewhere between the past and whatever came next. When Jed came back in, arms full of wood, he paused by the doorway and watched her for a moment, just a beat longer than usual. She looked like her mother did once, not in face, but in presence. A quiet strength. A fire that refused to go out. He set the logs down, brushing the snow off his shoulders, and sat across from her. "Do you remember the day you brought me in?" she asked suddenly. He nodded. "January 2nd. Snowed for 3 days after that. Thought I'd lose the barn roof. Did you know I'd stay?" He shook his head. "Didn't know anything that day. Just that you were cold. And crying. And that something in me stopped hurting when I picked you up." Lily lowered her eyes. "I found something in Daniel's things after Mark died. A letter. From his side of the family. They knew I was adopted. They said if I ever wanted to know more, they had names, documents. Maybe even a trail to the woman who left me. Jed's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't interrupt. I haven't opened it yet, she whispered. It's folded in the lining of my coat. Jed leaned forward. And what are you afraid of? I don't know, she admitted. That I'll stop feeling like I belong here. That it'll change what you and I had. He let her words settle between them. Then said quietly, truth doesn't undo love, Lily. It might sting, sure. Might change the shape of things. But it can't unmake what's been real. She looked at him, eyes wide with both fear and something braver underneath. Would you be angry if I looked? Jed smiled softly, the kind that came from deep knowing. I spent my whole life carrying things I never asked for. Regrets, silence. You were never one of those. Lily blinked hard, then slowly stood, went to her coat by the door, and reached into the lining. The envelope was yellowed, soft at the corners, but still sealed. She turned it over in her hands, the firelight catching on the worn edges. Jed watched her without pushing. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she tucked it back in her coat and sat down again. Maybe I'm not ready, but I don't think I'm scared anymore. That's enough, Jed said. Being ready comes after that. Daniel stirred, and she picked him up gently, resting him against her chest. His breathing steadied almost instantly, little fingers curling into her blouse. I used to wonder if I'd ever have something that felt like home, she whispered. Then you built it around me. Jed said nothing. He didn't need to. Later, that night, as snow began to fall again, Jed went to the barn to check on Clara. The mule grunted a soft greeting as he brushed down her flanks and checked the feed. He worked in silence until the soft crunch of boots behind him broke the stillness. It was Lily. You always come out here at night? She asked, smiling. Old habit, he said. She's family too. She stood beside him for a long time. Then, almost absently, said, Mark's folks wanted to take Daniel. Said I was too young to raise him alone. That maybe I'd want to move on. Jed looked up sharply, but she was calm. I said no, not because I didn't love them, but because I knew where I wanted my son to grow up, and it wasn't a house with lace curtains and marble steps. It was here, with trees and wood smoke, and a man who never gave up on a child that wasn't his. Jed swallowed hard, his voice rasped. You always were mine. The barn was quiet. Then, except for the breath of horses and the soft fall of snow, it wasn't forgiveness, because none was needed. It was something older, stronger. The sound of two people choosing each other, again not by blood, but by history, by heart. When they walked back to the cabin, the windows glowed warm ahead of them, like a beacon through the dark. Lily looked up at her father and said, I think we'll stay through the spring, maybe longer. Jed didn't reply, just held. The door opened. And behind them, the wind whispered through the trees, like it remembered everything that had ever been left unsaid and was grateful it didn't have to carry it anymore. Spring came slowly to the bitter hills, the way old men rise from sleep, stiff at first, cautious, but full of quiet promise. The snow pulled back in patches, revealing the stubborn green underneath. The creek near the back of Yet's land started to sing again, louder each day. And for the first time in decades, laughter returned to the cabin, soft and genuine, the kind that rises without permission. Lily had stayed, just like she said. She cleaned out the small storeroom behind the hearth, turned it into a nursery. Jed helped build a wooden cradle with his hands rough and imperfect, but sturdy as stone. Daniel teethed on the edge of it, while his grandfather carved a tiny bird into the headboard. They fit together, the three of them, like pieces from different puzzles that somehow made one picture, when laid in the same light. But the envelope still waited. It sat folded on the mantel now, no longer hidden, just ... waiting. Lily would glance at it sometimes while stirring stew or brushing Daniel's hair. It had become part of the cabin's rhythm, like the ticking clock or the wind against the window, silent, constant, full of meaning. One afternoon, after hanging fresh linens on the line, Lily found Jed sitting beneath a cottonwood tree that marked the edge of the southern field. He didn't look up when she approached, just patted the spot beside him. She sat, brushing dust from her skirt. I opened it, she said. Jed nodded, his eyes still on the horizon. She was 19. Name was Rebecca Dean. From Elgin, she'd come west with a man. He left her when he found out she was pregnant. She stayed in town long enough to sew me that quilt, and then she walked 3 days through snow to find someone she'd heard of. A man who didn't ask questions, who kept to himself, who'd once lost his own. Yet's jaw flexed me. Lily nodded. She wrote that she knocked, but you weren't home. So she left me on the porch. She said she stood in the trees for hours after, watching, making sure someone opened the door. Jed blinked slow. I didn't know. She signed the letter with one line. Lily pulled a folded page from her apron pocket and read, I gave her to a man whose heart had broken once, so she could heal it. And maybe, in doing so, she'd heal mine too. Jed didn't speak. Didn't have to. The land around them was already speaking, birds calling from the pines, the low hum of wind across new grass. A world that had been asleep was finally stretching. Awake. Lily looked down at the letter, then back up at Jed. She died 5 years ago. Cancer. The family who reached out. They didn't even know about me until after she passed. They sent this hoping I'd find peace, not answers. You found both, he said. She smiled. I did, but I found home first. They sat there until the sun dipped behind the hills, its light brushing the field's gold. Daniel crawled in the grass nearby, chasing shadows and butterflies, giggling as he reached. That evening, Lily tucked the letter into the pages of Yet's old Bible, not to hide it, just to let it rest. Later, over cornbread and beans, Jed caught Lily watching Daniel with a far-off look. You thinking again? He asked. She nodded. I think I want to teach again. There's a schoolhouse 2 valleys over. I passed it on the train coming in. They're looking for someone. Jed leaned back, taking it in. You think you'll be all right here with an old mule and a cranky trapper while you ride off teaching kids? I think, she said, touching his arm, he'll learn more in this cabin than most kids do in a city. That night, Lily wrote her own letter, not to anyone living, just to a woman named Rebecca, buried somewhere in a town Lily had never seen. She wrote by lamplight, Daniel asleep beside her, the silence around her deep and good. Dear Mama, she wrote, you were right. I healed something, maybe even more than you hoped. Thank you for your courage. And for the man who opened the door. She sealed it, then placed it on the mantel beside Jed's tobacco tin. Not for sending, just for remembering. And as the stars came out, and the wind swept gently across the field, the old cabin on the ridge stood firm and full of memories, of choices, of second chances that had somehow, by grace or grit, found their way home. Have you ever held on to a letter you weren't ready to open, one that carried a weight bigger than words? Share your thoughts in the comments, and keep following the trail. Healing takes time, but every page brings us closer. By mid-April, the fields behind Jed's cabin wore a soft green haze, and the creek chuckled louder through its thawed banks, chasing pebbles like children at play. Lily had started making the ride twice a week to the schoolhouse, 2 valleys over, a tiny, white building with a cracked bell and 6 desks that sat mostly empty. It had been closed for nearly a year, abandoned, when the last teacher moved east for her husband's work. But when Lily stepped through that door for the first time, chalk dust still clung to the slate, and faded alphabet cards fluttered like prayer flags along the wall. Jed watched her go each morning. Daniel perched on his hip, one hand in his beard, the other pointing after his mother like she was part legend. And maybe she was. To Jed, she always would be. They made a rhythm out of it. Mornings with porridge and coffee, Daniel learning to crawl through wild grass while Jed mended saddles and fences. Afternoons with quiet stories by the hearth, songs half-hummed, while peeling potatoes. On teaching days, Lily came home with ink-stained fingers and a face flushed from laughter or frustration. Always grateful for the fire already lit, the supper already warm. But one morning, after she left with the sun barely clearing the ridge, Jed noticed something odd. A bird had flown into the side of the cabin. He found it on the porch, stunned, wings splayed like prayers unanswered. It was a small sparrow, nothing rare. Just one of those ordinary things the world keeps making again and again. But this one looked familiar. And as Jed knelt beside it, something in him stirred. He lifted it gently, carried it to the barn where it was warm, and placed it in an old boot box lined with wool. Daniel watched wide-eyed. She's just lost her way, that's all, Jed murmured to the boy. Sometimes even wings forget the wind. He cared for that bird all day, fed it crumbs, watched it blink. By evening, it stewed again, wobbling, but alive. Lily returned just after dusk, saddle dusty, hair windblown, a grin on her lips. I had 3 students today, she called before dismounting, and they all asked if I was a real teacher. You are, Jed said, helping her down, and more. Later that night, while Lily rocked Daniel to sleep, Jed slipped outside. The sparrow sat in the box, eyes clear now. He opened the lid. The bird waited a moment, then took off wings, slicing the dusk like it had never fallen. Lily joined him, moments later, watching the dog swallow the trail where the bird had gone. "You think it'll come back?" she asked. Jed shook his head. "Doesn't need to. Not anymore." She leaned into him, shoulder to shoulder. "I think about leaving, sometimes," she admitted, "not because I want to but because I wonder if I should. Daniel deserves more than a shack in the hills." Jed didn't answer right away. Just let the quiet speak first. Then, "This shack raised a woman who teaches the children of 3 valleys. If that's not enough, then the world's got its head on wrong." She smiled into the dark. "Sometimes I forget who I used to be." "That's all right," he said. "Sometimes who you become is better than who you remember." They stayed there a while longer, watching the stars bloom above them, slow and steady, like a promise kept. And inside the cabin, the fire held, the cradle rocked, and the old Bible on the mantel kept its quiet vigiletta, tucked inside, pages dog-eared by time and use. Some homes weren't just places. They were people. They were the quiet between words. The coffee poured before you ask. The fire lit when you don't know you're cold. And this home was healing. By early May, the land was awake in full wildflowers, nodding along fence lines. Bees bumbling like they'd been born with songs in their wings. Jed walked the ridge trail each morning with Daniel in a sling across his chest, the baby gurgling at pine cones and reaching toward sunlight like it was something he could catch. Lily had begun teaching 4 days a week. The schoolhouse now echoed with the chatter of dusty boots and curious minds. Jed would pack her lunch some mornings: cold biscuits, pickled eggs, slices of dried apple, and slip a folded note inside with some simple line: "Proud of you," or "Rain's coming," or he said, "Dada today," but I think he meant the horse. One evening, she came home later than usual. Her boots were wet, the hem of her dress mud-streaked. Jed looked up from his chair as she entered. Daniel sleeping in the cradle. Her eyes told him something had shifted. "I met someone today," she said carefully. Jed straightened slightly, but didn't speak. "A woman mid-40s, name's Eliza Stone. She's a seamstress now, but 20 years ago, she worked in Elgin. Said she knew Rebecca, my mother." Jed let out a slow breath. "And she didn't know everything. Just said that Rebecca came to town scared. Talked sometimes about his sister. Maybe out west. Maybe looking for a new life." Lily sat at the edge of the hearth, brushing her fingers along the floorboards like she was tracing history. She asked if I wanted her help. Said she could reach out to people, look into records. "You gonna let her?" Lily was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I think I want to plant a garden." Jed blinked. "A garden?" She smiled. "I passed that little flat stretch by the barn, used to be the vegetable patch, right? Before the deer found it." "Yeah. Well, I was thinking, maybe beans, potatoes, squash, if the soil's still kind. You could build me a little fence." Jed chuckled. "So that's a no on the records." "It's a not right now. Maybe someday. But today, I want to grow something that stays." That night, they knelt in the soil together, Lily with her sleeves rolled in dirt under her nails, Jed guiding her hands the way he once taught her to shoot a rifle. Daniel watched from a blanket, gumming a wooden spoon and kicking at dandelions. The earth was soft, giving, and they buried seeds, like prayers, not knowing what would bloom, only that something would. Afterward, sitting on the porch, Lily looked at her father. "Do you think she knew when she left me with you? Do you think she believed I'd be all right?" Jed stared into the horizon, voice low. "I think she hoped. And hope's a powerful thing. Even if it breaks you, it still builds something in its place." Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. "I think I'm finally starting to understand." They sat that way until the stars came out, the soft squeak of the rocking cradle. Behind them, the scent of soil and pine thick in the air, and beneath the earth, things had already begun to stir. The rain came hard that night, the kind that drums steady on the roof and seeps deep into the earth, turning silence into music and memory into something you can smell in the air. Jed rose just after midnight to check the barn. He always did in storms, even when there were no animals needing him but Clara, who hated thunder and pretended not to. When he came back in, soaked and silent, he found Lily still awake at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. She didn't look up when he entered, just said softly, "I opened the letter again." Jed peeled off his wet coat and hung it by the stove. "You've read it a dozen times now." "This time I wrote one back." He turned, eyes narrowing slightly. "To Rebecca." Lily nodded. "I know it won't be sent, but I needed to say something. Not for her, for me. She slid the page across the table. Jed sat, taking his time, the old chair groaning beneath his weight. He read slowly, the way he always did, lips pressing tighter the deeper he went. Dear Mama, you left me on a porch, but you didn't leave me without love. You gave me to a man who never called himself brave, but did the bravest thing I know. He stayed. He raised me in quiet, in weather, in the spaces between grief and grace. He taught me how to read tracks in snow and in people. He never told me what I owed him, because he never saw it that way. I carry your eyes. I carry his heart. Maybe that's enough. When he finished, he didn't speak, just folded the page and handed it back, his eyes a little too glassy for the dim light. You reckon I should keep it? She asked. Jed cleared his throat. I reckon you already did. Rain thudded harder against the windows, a wind kicking up that made the eaves groan. Jed threw another log on the fire. Lily stood, took the letter gently, then paused. You ever wonder what your life would have looked like if I hadn't showed up on that porch? He didn't answer at first. Then, I used to, but not in years. The wondering stopped when you learned to say Papa, and meant it. She smiled, that small kind of smile that holds more sorrow than joy, but feels richer for it. The next morning, the storm was gone, but the earth was soft and shining. Lily stepped outside with Daniel on her hip, and found tiny green shoots pushing through the garden bed. Beans, just barely. She knelt in the mud. Let Daniel touch the sprout with pudgy fingers. See that? She whispered. That's what waiting turns into. Later that day, Lily returned to the schoolhouse, while Jed watched Daniel. The boy had started crawling faster, babbling to himself as he chased sunbeams across the floor. Jed sat nearby with an old knife and a block of cedar, carving a tiny toy horse, smaller this time, with smoother legs. He didn't hear the wagon approach until it stopped out front. A knock came, firm, 2 times. Then again. Jed opened the door and found a woman there. Late 40s, strong build, travel-worn face. Her hair was tucked under a weathered hat, but her eyes were the same storm gray as Lily's. I'm looking for Lily Carter, she said. Jed studied her for a long moment, hand resting lightly on the doorframe. She's at the schoolhouse, won't be back till near supper. The woman nodded. I'll wait. I came a long way. He stepped back, the door creaking open wider. Come in, then. Storm's over, but you look like someone with rain still in her bones. She hesitated, then stepped over the threshold. And just like that, the past returned not as thunder, but as a knock, a face, a name still waiting to be spoken. The woman's name was Claire. She took off her coat slow, careful not to drip on the floor, her eyes scanning the cabin with quiet oars, if memory was brushing the edges of things she'd only ever heard described. Jed offered her coffee. She said yes, though her hands trembled just slightly around the cup. Daniel, ever curious, stared at her from the rug, chubby fists planted wide. Claire knelt, not too close, and gave him a small smile. He's beautiful, she said. Looks just like her. Jed nodded. He's got a bit of her stubborn, too. Claire's gaze returned to him, and for a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, gently, I'm her aunt, Rebecca's older sister. Jed didn't react outwardly, but something in his face shifted like a shadow pulling back from old stone. She told me once, Claire went on, voice low, that if anything ever happened, if she couldn't make it work, she'd leave the baby with someone who'd loved her better than the world had loved us. Then she disappeared. I searched for years, came west, lost hope. Then, last month, a woman named Eliza wrote me. Said a girl named Lily might be who I was looking for. Jed folded his arms across his chest. You came all this way to find her? Claire nodded. I came all this way to ask for permission, to tell her about her mother, and to let her decide if I have a place in her life. He studied her for a long beat, then jerked his chin toward the fire. You can wait there. She'll be home by dusk. The hours passed slow, but kind. Claire helped shell peas without being asked. She watched Daniel nap, then wake with a giggle that startled a laugh from her lips. Jed didn't speak much, but he watched and listened. When the sun began to sink, hooves approached. Lily's voice echoed faint on the trail. Jed stepped outside first, giving her a moment before she saw the stranger on the porch. Her eyes caught Claire's, and something in her froze. Claire stood slowly. Lily didn't speak. I'm not here to take anything, Claire said, gently. I just wanted to know you, to let you know me, if you wanted. Jed stayed by the door, his presence steady. Lily looked from him to Claire. Her voice, when it came, was barely above breath. You knew her. My mother. Claire, eyes glossed. I knew the part of her that survived. The part that sang when she held your baby dress. The part that wrote your name in a diary every year on your birthday. Even after she stopped believing she'd ever see you again. Lily took a slow breath, then stepped forward. What was she like? Claire smiled. Wild, sharp, brave in ways that hurt her. She was always running toward something and afraid she didn't deserve it once she caught it. Lily's eyes shone now. That sounds like me. Claire blinked fast. I hoped it would. They sat together on the porch as the light faded, Daniel between them, holding one finger from each woman, like he knew they were both pieces of a map he hadn't yet drawn. That night, over supper, Lily asked questions. About Rebecca's childhood. About the song she used to hum. About the one time she almost left town for Chicago, and the reason she never did. Claire answered each gently, never pushing, just giving what she could. And when the baby cried later, she offered to rock him just once. Lily hesitated, then nodded. In the quiet, Claire held Daniel close, her voice trembling as she whispered, "You were loved, even in the leaving." Jed watched from the doorway, eyes soft, then stepped back inside, giving them space. In the corner of the mantel, Lily's letter to her mother remained unopened, still tucked inside the old Bible. But that night, she placed another one beside it, this one addressed, "To the woman who found me again." Because not all healing comes from answers. Some of it comes from someone simply saying your name like it matters. And meaning it. Summer pressed in gently that year, the heat coming not in waves, but in warmth that soaked into the bones like forgiveness. The hills greened over, the creek ran soft and slow, and the cabin stood the way it always had, weathered, quiet, full of stories it didn't need to tell anymore. But this summer, the porch didn't sit empty. Claire stayed on a while, not forever, just long enough. She helped Lily plant a second garden, her hands sure, her laughter surprising even herself. They shared memories and mended the ones they didn't know they were allowed to feel. Claire didn't try to replace anything. She didn't have to. She came not to fill space, but to honor it, and that made all the difference. Daniel learned to walk by the end of July, his chubby legs wobbling across the wood floor, while Jed clapped twice and whistled low. The boy giggled every time he fell. Every fall meant someone would pick him up. He had no reason to fear gravity. Lily took a permanent post at the schoolhouse, riding in every morning with ink-stained fingers and a clean braid down her back. She taught reading, yes, but also what patience looked like, and how kindness was never weakness. Her students followed her like geese in tall grass. One of the older girls started calling her Miss Lily of the Hills, and the name stuck longer than Lily would admit. And Jed. Jed seemed lighter. His hands didn't shake so much when he carved. He whistled now when he chopped wood. Sometimes at dusk, he'd sit on the porch with Daniel in his lap and hum old songs, melodies no one remembered the names of, but that still knew their way home. One Sunday evening, just after supper, Lily brought out 3 cups of sweet tea and sat with her father and her aunt under the porch's long shadow. The fields stretched golden, the air soft as cotton. Claire took a sip, then said, "I'll be leaving come morning." Lily nodded, no surprise in her eyes. "Back to Elgin?" "No, Oregon. There's work there. And something about a quieter life sounds ... good." They didn't say goodbye in any dramatic way. There were no tears, just a long, full silence. The kind shared by people who'd come through storms together and knew how to sit in the calm without rushing it. When Claire did ride off the next morning, Daniel waved from Yet's arms. Lily watched until she was a dot on the trail, then gone behind the rise. She didn't cry. She smiled. Because sometimes people leave, but this time, it wasn't loss, it was peace. Later that week, Lily finally opened her mother's letter, one last time, not out of pain or longing, but gratitude. She read it in the garden, her fingers brushing the new bean leaves, the earth warm beneath her knees. When she was done, she folded it, pressed it to her lips, then buried it beneath the row of squash. A way of letting go, a way of letting grow. That night, she told Jed, "I want to build a new room. For Daniel, a real one, with a window and a desk and a place to dream." Jed just nodded. "We'll need cedar and strong hinges. He's gonna have big dreams." They sat in silence a while, the fire crackling inside, stars blinking to life overhead, and Lily leaned into his shoulder and said, "I used to wonder what kind of woman I'd become." "You're her now," he said. "You just had to walk the trail to find her." The porch light burned low behind them, soft as ever, but it had never gone out. not 20 winters ago. Not in the in-between. Not when she knocked. And certainly, not now. Because some stories don't end. They just settle, like roots in the earth. Like laughter in the walls. Like love in quiet, faithful ways that wait. Even through the longest snow. If this story found something in you, an old ache, a quiet hope, a long ago knock, share it in the comments. What would you do if someone you once lost came back? And if this tale warmed something you didn't know was still cold? We'd be honored if you stayed for the next one. Subscribe for more Western tales of healing, sacrifice, and love that lasts beyond goodbye.